One Fine Morning is a mainly French language movie inspired by writer-director Mia Hansen loves real life experiences that was written while she cared for her elderly father who was suffering from Alzheimer's. In it, we follow Sandra, played by Leah Seydoux, as she navigates caring for her father, which was portrayed really effectively by Pascal Gregory, as it's decided that he needs further care, all while she's trying to be a working single mother and enjoy a complicated relationship. It's a fresh and interesting approach on the story of someone suffering from Alzheimer's to take it from the perspective of someone in the family suffering from having to kind of navigate being around it and looking at how much it impacts those around them and the various other aspects of life rather than just focusing on the illness itself, which we've seen done quite well a lot in the cinema. So there's not much new ground they could really tread unless they've got something new to say. And that's not to say that the movie shoves her father struggles to decide. It very much doesn't. And a really effective part of the movie is that many people who've gone through this will no doubt relate to, follows their challenges to try and find a suitable home for him when it's clear that living at home will no longer be in his best interests. The movie is getting a ton of rave reviews from critics, and not negative, but more balanced views from audiences. It's one of those kind of movies. And in this case, I'd actually tend to lean closer to the audience views than the critics. In many ways, how personal this story is to love is both the movie's biggest strength and its biggest weakness. The script itself is hard hitting, it's real, and it's unflinchingly honest at times with quotes like, "I feel closer to my father with his books than with him," or a sequence where he lists the three people that matter to him in life to Sandra, but doesn't include her. And these are just casually dropped in throughout, and they're devastating. On the other hand, and again, I hate to criticize someone telling a story that's so personal to them, but often when you're so close to the source material, it can kind of hamper your objectivity. Often the author who tells stories that are based on stuff that they've really experienced will feel the need to honor that source material that the audience just isn't aware of. And while it may have resonated for them and been a very real part of their story and a part of the timeline that they feel is important, it mightn't objectively fit the story. Like if you're telling this as a fresh story for cinema, you probably wouldn't include parts that are in it. The acting and editing as a result, for me, feel necessary and a bit box ticking rather than flowing nicely together. So, for example, at a time we need to show a connection between her and a child, they just throw in a scene with them sharing an ice cream. And just as you're starting to wonder, how is she a single mother? What's the story there? We cut to a scene with her talking to a friend and potential love interest, saying that she just feels her romance days are behind her. There's a lot of just loose and kind of clunky exposition in here where it's just like, oh, I'm just gonna like show you this because you need to know that for later on. And that lack of objectivity really harmed my connection with it at times. The central love story, for example, made me feel quite uncomfortable. And I felt for a lot of the movie like that was deliberate. She was telling us about how, while she was trying to care for someone that she loved and going through such a stressful and traumatic time in her life, she was making poor decisions because she wasn't fully at the wheel in her personal life. And that's what I thought it was. But that's not where it ended up. So instead, I was actually just worried for Mia and herself, and I was worried that, like, Mia, have you made a mistake here? Can you not see it, like, and what's going on? And again, you shouldn't really be thinking about the writer and director throughout the movie that you're watching. And I think that's kind of what my issue here. This probably should have been a story that connected with me in various different ways. I've been through similar scenarios where I've like had a loved one that has been suffering from similar diseases and kind of been sick, like when people are sick and I'm making poor choices in my life and kind of spiraling in that sense and so on. So again, like there are parts of it that I wanted to connect to, but instead for me, it felt a bit clinical. It felt a bit literal. And I hate to use this word, but it's the only thing that I could kind of think of when I think of it. It felt a bit sterile at times. And I understand how that can be true to life and how we experience things, because oftentimes when we're going through it, it's not this traumatic emotional experience. We're often just numb. We're in autopilot. We're just getting through the day to day, but it doesn't necessarily make for a great movie. Put it this way, there's a constant discussion throughout of books, of music, culture, and art, and how, like, and this is a really interesting point made at one stage, how the art a person creates and consumes defines them as a person. And it's ironically the artistic aspect that's missing in this movie. This feels more like a reenactment or just a reconstruction of actual true events told rather than a story crafted to challenge, provoke, or soothe or make people relate. You'd kind of need to fill in your own blanks and work to connect with it, or at least that was the case for me. And maybe that is just me. Maybe this one just didn't land for me, and that's fine. And that happens. Maybe you'll see it and go out and do so. And if it's the subject matter that interests you, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying avoid it. I'm not saying don't go see it. But you may see a masterpiece here. I didn't. For me, I've seen this done better elsewhere. It was an admirable attempt with some admirable subject matters that they tackled, but it didn't fully work for me, unfortunately, this time.